Hi there, I'm Cody Balch from Better Equipped. I just want to introduce you to the video that you are about to watch of Garrett Murphy sharing his personal testimony of finding freedom in Jesus Christ from pornography. And he's at a guest speaking at a church, Centerpoint Church in Danville, Kentucky in 2024. And I just know how blessed you're going to be by this sharing of Garrett to this congregation, and how cool that is that you get to listen in on this. Listen, Garrett is serious about you finding freedom in Jesus Christ. So am I. And if you would love to have a guest speaker at your church or your, whether it's a conference or whatever it might be, listen, Garrett or I would love to help you with that. And so you can go to betterequipped.net/freedom, or you can email us at findingfreedominlight@gmail.com. And we'd love to connect with you and help encourage you personally or your church or group on this topic. So, hey, engage with this deeply. Open your ears, open your heart, and hear Garrett's story and testimony on finding freedom from pornography. Here we go.
But the truth is, man, his ministry and what he's dove into because of what God has allowed him to have some freedom from is this touchy subject to topic we're going to dive in today, which is porn. And I pray you understand, you hear this from a truth perspective today, because it has the potential to set a lot of people free. So Garrett, welcome.
Thank you. So first, we've got this pulled up. This is a digital business card, and so no one feels called out. I don't want anyone to feel guilt or shame. This is how you get in contact with me. I literally want anyone with a phone, every single person right now with a phone, to pull out their phone. Take a picture of this QR code. I'm not kidding, because I don't want anybody pulling this up in the middle and having to admit in front of everyone that I've got a problem with this and I need to talk to you. I literally want everyone to, because we're about to go over the statistics. I want to just be a resource to anyone, anybody here, anybody listening. Put this on your Facebook account for anybody, because if you don't struggle with it, you never have. That is great. That is phenomenal. You are blessed. But you have people very close to you in your life, whether it's a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, your husband, your children, that do. The statistics prove it. But the reason you don't know is because it remains in the darkness, which is why they need help, they need community, and they need resources. So even if you don't struggle with it, take your phone out right now, put the QR code in there, and push open in Chrome or open in Safari or whatever, and save to contacts. It has my personal cell phone number. It has my email address. It has Better Equipped/Freedom, where we have resources. You can sign up for accountability groups, individual coaching, get all the resources that we have, and you have access to myself and to Cody Balch. So take a picture. That way, down the road, when you run into somebody who's struggling with this, you can give them this resource. And we're not a one-stop shop. We point you in the right direction of what might be able to help you. Okay. So everybody got that? Okay. If you'd pull up the statistics. So these are off Covenant Eyes. If you don't know what Covenant Eyes is, it's an internet filter and more so accountability software, right? It's so hard to filter things on the internet, but they do that, but mainly it's an accountability software where people can enter into an accountability relationship with at least one other person that gets a report of things that might have been seen or looked at, so that those things can be discussed. But there are all kinds of stats on there. I just chose a few of them, and they're in no particular order here. But one of those is in 2018 study revealed, and that was 6 years ago, so I imagine it's significantly worse than this. Nearly 27% of teens received sexts, around 15% were sending them, and 57% of teens search out porn at least monthly. Next slide, please. 90% of teens and 96% of young adults are either encouraging, accepting, or neutral when they talk about porn with their friends. That was the case when I was in college 20 years ago, in high school 20 years ago. It was pretty much socially accepted in high school and college back then. But now 90% of teens and 90% of young adults are encouraging or accepting of it. 55% of adults 25 and older believe that porn is wrong. Just 55%. All right, next. 51% of male students and 30% of female students first viewed pornography before their teenage years. The first exposure to pornography among men is 12 years old, on average. 71% of teens hide online behavior from their parents. And in 2016, which is an old study, 45% of adolescents in Canada admitted to problems with erectile dysfunction. I think there's at least another slide. 41% of teens believe that porn is bad for society, compared to 31% of young adults, 51% of millennials, 44% of Gen Xers, and 59% of boomers. So these are low percentages of society that believe that porn is bad. It's become, as he said, normalized. Right? He said the phone is the new magazine. I think there's one more, and we'll go from there. Maybe, I don't know how many I sent. Maybe I sent more than I thought. 68% of divorce cases involve. All right, so this is within marriage, the relationship with marriage. 68% of divorce cases involve one party meeting a new lover over the internet. 56 involved one party having an obsessive interest in pornographic websites. 70% of wives of sexual addicts could be diagnosed with PTSD. Next slide. That's it? Okay, I thought I sent one. Only in their study, only 7% of churches have any sort of ministry or anything available for someone struggling with sexual addiction or pornography. Only 7% of churches. So if you think about the millions of men that are within the church, only 7% of them have access to something within their church. And then how tiny that number of men is that actually take advantage of that and are a part of that ministry. The church is failing the church. We are failing ourselves by not addressing this. And so I am honored. I made the trip up here, flew up here yesterday. I arrived at like 3:30 afternoon, rented a car, and I'm leaving. I have to leave Danville by 1:30, but I am available to talk or for lunch or anybody that wants to talk about this afterward until 1:30 because I'm flying back home. But I was more than willing to come here to talk to you guys because I'm so proud of you for talking about this touchy subject. And it's a touchy subject because it is such a deep and emotional thing. For men, it's typically from a place of fear, statistically, of how badly they will harm their wife and what will happen to their reputation if it's exposed. And it's the deepest part of so many people's relationship, the pain that it has caused because is it a part of their marriage and affects their intimacy and their relationship. And so I'm so honored to come talk to you guys about this today. And I want to share with you, I've come because I have a word of hope for you. I have a story of hope for you. I have a testimony that I really want to share with you. And to show you the need to live in the light and to do it in community with other people and to not stop talking about this issue that is greater than an epidemic in this country, in this world today. When I was a young toddler, I was a victim of some sexual abuse at the hands of an uncle. And I went on as a young child in curiosity, having been exposed to that at such a young age, to have oddly curious sexual relationships with a few young children and neighbors and cousins. That ended. I don't know why. At some point, maybe there was a certain age where I understood this is not appropriate. This is not a good thing. Don't do this, and it did. But at age 10, when I experienced climax for the first time, having no idea what that even was, what had happened, it scared me to death. But I was extremely curious in what had taken place because no adult had ever talked to me that would happen one day. And so from that point on, as a young boy that was curious and had been exposed to things I should have never been exposed to, I felt guilt and shame for the first time at 10 years old. And so I hid the sin that had crept into my life. And it's hard for me to even say it was sin at 10 years old. Like, it's hard for me to grasp, was that sin at 10 years old when I was just a curious boy who had been exposed to something I shouldn't have? But the problem lies when I hid it. I didn't go talk to an adult. I didn't go seek out resources. I didn't join an accountability group at 10 years old. I didn't go talk to a counselor. I just didn't tell anybody. And so almost daily, from that point on, I would seek to have that same experience. And my parents didn't know. Nobody else in the world knew. And that went on for a few years until in the youth group, some boys, friends of mine, really good friends of mine, shared with me some softcore pornography. And so the JCPenney catalog that I had found of my mom's that she had not ripped, she tried to protect me. She had not ripped out the lingerie section. Wasn't enough anymore after I was exposed to this. And at 14 years old was the first time I was exposed to hardcore pornography at a magazine at football camp. And once I was exposed to that, nothing else would satisfy. And this is the nature of sin, of taking pleasure in the flesh. The pleasures of the flesh, the pleasures of the eyes, that it escalates and it escalates to need more and want more, and there is never long-term or full satisfaction. And so at 14 years old, there were creative ways to try to find it, but most of my friends had the internet, and there were no filters that I'm aware of at that time, or their parents didn't know about them, or that it was even a danger. And then everybody had HBO and Cinemax, and then just all the channels, and I could get it however I needed to. So I grew up, and every year at church camp, I'd go to church camp literally for 4 weeks, not necessarily consecutive video. I would look forward to it every year because I knew I wouldn't have access to it. And I'd be clean for a week. And I'd be on a spiritual high, and I'd be able to fight like I'd never fought throughout the year, because this sin, since I was a 10-year-old boy, I hated it. I hated it. And I know for those of you who struggle with it, you hate it too. And yet you're anticipating the next time you can go use this particular drug. And so every year camp would happen, and within a day or two of camp being over, I'd fall to it again. And the cycle would persist. And I look for, well, when I'm married, I won't need to do it again. Getting married at 20 years old and not having even told my wife about the struggle whatsoever. I was just confused and frustrated during our honeymoon. Immediately, I wanted to seek escape and pleasure through pornography, which was far easier than a true, real relationship. And so then it wasn't introduced into our marriage. I kept it in hiding, but it was still a part of my life, and it was affecting my marriage. A year into our marriage, I was laying in bed, and my wife had discovered undeleted browser history on our computer. And she runs into the room with a look of disgust and disdain for me in her eyes. And she says, "You are disgusting. This stuff is filthy. How can you look? I cannot believe that you looked at that. If you ever look at that again, I'm gone. We're divorced. We don't have kids. So if you ever look at that again, I'm out of here." And I knew at that time, I loved her, right? We were high school sweethearts. We had gotten married, but I knew I had been hiding this part of me, my identity, for 3 years in the relationship with her. And I knew if we got divorced at the church that I was at, you do not serve in any sort of leadership role after that. And the Lord has called me into ministry. He called me at a very young age into ministry. And so I would ruin the reputation of myself and my family and bring shame on my family that's within the church. So for the next 44 days, I fought and I battled. I did great things. I memorized scripture. I read scripture every day. I tried to pray every day. And by try, I don't mean I tried to work it into my schedule. I mean, it's really hard to pray when you have so much darkness and sin in your life. But after I had white-knuckled it for so long, I believed one little lie for just long enough that I looked again. And I remember in that moment, my hopes of getting this out of my life were just crushed. Because I knew if I told her at that point, she would leave. She hadn't even brought it up again in those 44 days. She treated me like less than, but it wasn't something that we openly communicated about. I actually went to a college professor I was at a Christian college, and I went to a college professor who was known as the guy who talks about relationships and sex, and he somehow always worked it into all of his Bible classes. It was really weird, actually. But I went and talked to him because I thought maybe he can help me. He sounds like he talks to lots of men about this. And I went and told him about the issue, and he turned it. So I'd only talked to one other group of my really close friends, and they looked at me like they had no idea what I was talking about, like I was a freak, even though I knew all of those Christian friends struggled with it too. That was the first time I'd ever talked to anyone about it. This next time was the college professor, and he point blank asked me if I was not able to satisfy my wife and turned it around on me as if it were all my fault for not knowing how to. Do you not understand this started when I was 10? I told him that. It started when I was 10. It has nothing to do with her or satisfying her or anything like that. So those are my only two experiences ever talking to another person about it. And they did not go well whatsoever. More confusing than anything. But after I sunk back into it at 44 days, I knew I had to hide it even deeper, bury it even deeper, and make it more difficult to ever find that I was involved in that, because I did not want to lose the love of my life, and I did not want to lose the opportunities I had to serve in ministry to the Lord. So for the next 9 years, I viewed or used pornography. I don't know what the average was. Maybe every other day. I'm not sure. Sometimes there'd be 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 days streaks that I would go on that I felt so good, and then as soon as I would buy another lie and look again, all hopes were crushed. But I always fought, and I always hated it. At this stage in life, I was 30 years old. I was a loan officer at a bank. I already owned, I don't know how many rental properties. I had gotten into rental properties on the side. My wife is gorgeous. My daughter, who at the time was, 6 years old, it's beautiful. Had a new 1-year-old child, so beautiful family in a beautiful house. We'd taken Dave Ramsey Financial Peace. We were going to have our debt paid off in 2 years. Everything was going so great. I had a great job. I was the youth leader at our church. I would lead. I also led worship. I drove the church van. I would teach. I would preach. I did all those things. I was a bright, shining star at our church in Mount Sterling, Kentucky. The church I was raised in. And nobody in that whole church knew that I struggled with pornography. Well, I had bought a piece of rental property because the Lord was calling me to get out of working a 9-to-5 job so that I could do ministry full time. Now, this was always hard to reason with, because I knew I got this sin issue, and it literally keeps me at a distance from God. I don't know how to get closer to Him with this, because I don't know how to pray and draw near to Him and sit with Him and surrender to Him with this in my life. But I knew it was pretty clear what He was calling me to do. And within 2 weeks of feeling Him urging me, I had a contract on a 21-unit. It was a U-shaped apartment that was built back in the 60s around an old plantation house that was built back in the 1800s. And I was going to have to renovate this because it had been abandoned for 20 years, right? I didn't have a whole lot of money, so I found this, and I knew it was going to be my ticket out of the bank to work for myself, to go into ministry. But inside the house in the middle, I knew that would be my office. And I would be the only one with the key. I would be the only person. I had no employees that would be in that building all day, every day. I'd have to have the internet to operate my business. And I knew, because I knew when I'm alone, I lack self-control. I don't have self-control. Being alone was one of the worst things ever for me. And I knew that buying this property for the Lord to go into ministry was going to destroy me if it remained in the darkness. And so the day that I closed on that piece of property, I went into that house. I went up into one of the rooms upstairs. And I prayed a prayer out of fear and desperation like I had never prayed in my life. And I said, Lord, because I had promised God and myself, I'll never look again. Hundreds, if not thousands of times. And I knew that promise meant next to nothing. But I prayed a different prayer that day, and I said, Lord, I know that it is your will that I buy this and that I enter into ministry. I don't know how that's going to work. But please protect this building. Make this a safe place for me. Because if I let the darkness, if the evil is in here, if I let sin and the enemy in and the lies that I believe, if I let them in here, I'm done for. And I knew I had a chance because I'd never looked in that room. I had never let it in. It was a safe place. And I said, the day that I bought it, I want this to be yours. Let it be yours. Protect me. I will go out, and it was on Main Street, just like this church. I will go out in Main Street before I do something like that in here. Do it in front of the world. And I meant it. There's something different, something kind of radical about this prayer that I prayed, because I knew it would be the death of me, like the end of me, if I let it into that building. Now, when you struggle with an addiction for years, having trust in yourself, even in prayers, your own words, your own ideas, that's something that, like, there's very little trust. But something happened that day. And within a few weeks, I was having to work on renovating the 21 units. And I had to cut out the galvanized pipes so we could put new water lines in. And I didn't have a lot of money, and I didn't have a lot of contractors. So in the mornings, I'd show up at 6 o'clock so I could work for an hour and a half to 2 hours before I went to the office just down the street at 8 o'clock. And so I had gotten up into the attic. I was doing this every morning, pitch black. This was in the middle of October, right before court days. If you guys know where court days at in Mount Sterling, that's where it's at. And I crawled up into the attic, and a buddy of mine they'd planted a church, maybe 6 months, a year prior, I don't know. But they'd started to put their sermons on podcast. I had never listened to a podcast before. I'm not sure I even knew necessarily what that was back in 2015. So I started listening to this podcast, and one day I crawled up in there and I pushed play on the next podcast, and the next one comes on. And the pastor, his name's Cody. He's choked up from the moment that he opens his mouth. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And he goes on to say that he'd prepared a lesson, but he's really nervous about doing it because his mother-in-law and sister-in-law had just walked in unannounced. And he said, but I need to do this for me and for you. And for the next 50 minutes, he goes on and talks about his addiction to pornography and the struggle since he was a child. And his story was so similar to mine, as I found in the last 8 years that it's so similar to so many other men. Ladies, it's not your fault. We're exposed to things that we shouldn't be, or we're curious, however we stumble upon it. It's long before we enter into relationship with you. But I listened to him for 50 minutes, multiple times, just breaking down at the pain that he's caused to his wife. But the beautiful thing is, he had a story of hope. That he had told her about it before they ever got married, much smarter man than I am. And that they worked on it, and they had conversations on a weekly basis about it. And they had software on the computer and all. And he had met with some other guys during college and had accountability partners. These things I had never heard of. I didn't know that this was even a possibility. And so I turned the Sawzall off because I'm up there in the attic, pitch black, with a headlamp on. I got my goggles on. I've got a mask on. I'm laying on 40-year-old insulation. The dust is flying everywhere in the beam of my light. And as soon as he had started this sermon and said the topic, I just lay there. And I don't know if you've ever laid on beams in an attic. Like, I'm just laying on these beams. It's like the most uncomfortable thing in the world. And I lay there for 50 minutes. And it is truly as if the Lord shined light into my life in that moment as I realized I've been in the church my entire life. Every Sunday morning, evening, Wednesday night, I've been to every youth meeting. I've been to every single gospel meeting. I literally didn't miss anything. I genuinely enjoyed and always wanted to go, and I never skipped anything. And for 30 years, I've never heard a man confess his struggle with lust. Not one time. And so it opened this possibility that you're allowed to talk about this and get help from other people. I realized in that moment that our church didn't talk about their sin. In church, there is a problem with not talking about what we struggle with. Because if we are not talking about the sin that is in our life, the things that we struggle from, it just remains in the darkness. And in the darkness, it's filled with nothing but lies. It's filled with nothing but deceit. It is not filled with the hope, the truths, and the freedom that Jesus Christ offers. It is filled with tricks and snares from the enemy. And as I lay there and I listened to this, I was just trying to process what in the world, how can I have never heard this? Like, it was just like I was personally offended. How could my youth leaders have never told me? How could my parents have never talked to me about this? How can these men who I know, like statistically, I know they're struggling with it. I see the way they look at women. I know. How are they not talking to us about this? Why are we fighting this battle alone? For 20 years, I fought alone. And so I texted my friend Adam, and I said, can you get me Cody's phone number? And he got me his number. I texted Cody the same day. I listened to that podcast 2 or 3 times in the 24-hour period. I texted Cody and I said, hey, I listened to your podcast. Can we talk? And he said, absolutely. We'll talk tomorrow morning. It's 6 o'clock the next morning. I went back to that office all alone. And I said, I listened to your podcast, and I just poured out. Poured out like I'd never poured out before. And he was so empathetic. It's like he understood what I did far better than I understood what I was doing. Because he understood the lies I was believing, and he was able to reveal them to me. And so for an hour and a half, we talked, and I had never felt seen or understood in any way ever like that in my life, and it felt so cleansing to confess my sins and my struggles and the emotional turmoil, the spiritual turmoil that I had been in since I was a 10-year-old boy, believing and loving God, and yet still having this dark, compartmentalized part of my life that was keeping me from a true, authentic relationship with God. 30 years old, still felt like a child. And so Cody talked, and I remember, I'll never forget, he kept saying, don't buy the lies. Stop buying the lies. And when I talked to him, he'd say, have you thought about this? Is this what you're believing? It's a lie. And here's the truth. And so Cody's actually a year younger than I am. I'm 39 years old now. I was 30 at the time. And he was able to speak truth into my life. And by him doing that, he was shining light in dark places that I didn't even know what the truth was. What the difference in is the truth and the lies. But him being able to speak into it revealed what the truth is and where there was hope. In that hope, I found more light and more light and more light. Freedom. And so at 19, so I started texting him the next day. He said, you call me, text me anytime you want. And so I started texting him every single day, multiple times, or calling him at least once a day and saying, hey, this happened. I wanted to look at this, or I wanted to look at her, and I wanted to do this. But I didn't, and I knew because I was going to talk to Cody. And there was like some accountability that was just like, I was excited to have somebody to talk to. And so every single day, and the first day I said, it's been one day. I didn't look because I had looked at pornography the day before. One day. And then the second day, and I was still texting and calling him. Third day, fourth day, fifth day. Well, I got to day 19, which that's a good streak. That's a good streak. But it was like 19 days I'd never experienced before because every single day I was able to talk about what was going on in here. And so I get to 19 days, and I was the youth leader for our youth group, and I'd taken them to Richmond to a youth rally, and my brother, who was in a Christian college getting his a degree to become a preacher, he had come. He was 19 years old. And he was going to show me something on his phone. When he clicked on his Safari app, he turned his wrist so I couldn't see his phone. And in that moment, I knew my little brother, who's 11 years younger than I am, he has the same struggle. It doesn't matter that he's at a Christian college. It doesn't matter that he's going to go get a preaching degree. It doesn't matter that he's a truly great kid. He has the same struggle. And I thought to myself, I have to talk to him. Even though I'd only talked to 3 people in my whole life. Cody being the only good experience. And I said, hey, before you head back to college tomorrow, because this was on a Saturday, I said, tomorrow morning, Sunday morning, can we talk? Let's meet for breakfast. Didn't tell him what it was about. Afraid he wouldn't come. So we went back to my office. The next morning we met at 7 o'clock, and I just told him about my struggle with pornography, as real as I could be. And he just wept. I'll never forget the big wing-back chair he sat in. And my little brother wept for me. I thought he was weeping for himself. And he said, I was exposed to it when I was 11 years old. And I've had it hidden for 8 years myself. And I told my brother, I said, listen, I the same as you, I've promised myself, I've promised God, I've given myself consequences, rewards, anything. I've broken phones, I've broken computers, I've smashed computers with baseball bats, I've smashed laptops on the floor. I've done everything I can think of. I said, I can't promise that I don't have a solution. I don't necessarily have a solution, but I will not let you, my dear little brother, do this alone. I said, if we stay addicted to pornography the rest of our lives, we'll at least do it together and fight the battle together. And so he was able to confess that morning, and he joined in the conversation with me and Cody. So every single day we'd text each other. Well, at day 140, we had 140 days worth of accountability texts in the text thread. And I couldn't bring myself to delete it, even though I knew my wife could find it. Well, one day she had a feeling she needed to check my phone. So I guess it was the Lord's timing for her to be brought into the light in this. And she read every single one of them. And she comes in the room as she did 9 years prior, and I'm laying in the bed. And she says, how? How do you do this? You can get up there and you can lead us in worship and you can teach and you can have that big smile like you've got everything together. You're nothing but a hypocrite. You're nothing but a liar. I don't even know who you are. She confirmed what I always felt, that she didn't know who I was. She said, you're disgusting. And she walked out of the room. And it was like she was, she thought everything was great. We've almost got a $200,000 house paid off in 2 years. Like Dave Ramsey, everything was timing. We had kids right when we wanted to. He's got a great job. She's a stay-at-home mom already. And everything was great. And so she went from here down to here because of the sexual betrayal that I had caused, and she didn't even know for the 12 years that we had been in a relationship. And I went from being in the dark since I was 10 years old to finally the right people know, and there's an accountability process in place. It's in the light. And I felt like there was a shift for her and me, that it just went like this. And I felt literally in my body and my soul, I can't even describe it. This was a feeling I'd never had in my entire life. And I just lay there almost paralyzed in whatever this is. I just want to stay here. I just want to stay here forever. And it didn't make sense. I didn't want to go argue. I didn't want to talk. It's like in the moment I didn't even care about her, which is really strange because in the past it was always like, just lie, get yourself out of it. Just lie, get yourself out of it. Just play it down, whatever it might be. But in that moment, it's like something was happening in me. The Lord was present in that room, and here's what He said: "You're in the light. I want to stay in the light." He said, just stay in the light. And I knew in that moment, it just meant, don't hide anymore. Don't hide anymore. And by His grace and His power alone, she came back in sometime. I don't know how long I lay in that bed thinking, processing, literally just like literally sitting in the presence of light. And she came back in the room. And I have no idea what she said, but there were a lot of questions, a lot of, questions I didn't want to answer. But I just thought, don't go back into the dark. Stay in the light. So I truthfully answered the hardest questions I've ever been asked in my life. Men, if you've been there, they're the worst. It is the hardest thing because you're shining light in the darkest places. And there came a point as I was doing it, it was like, this is what it's like to tell the truth. This is what it's like to tell the truth. And while I was, again, hurting her and taking her lower and lower, I was feeling something I'd never felt before. And And I told her this, I can't promise you I won't look at pornography again. I can't promise you I won't return to these things again. I can't, because that itself would probably be a lie because I've broken that promise so many times. But here's something I will genuinely, authentically promise you right now. I'm not going to lie anymore. I won't hide anymore. So if I look, I'll tell you. If I look at a woman, I'll tell you. If I have any lust whatsoever, I'm going to tell you, because I had started to learn to do this with Cody and my brother. I'm sure she didn't believe me in the moment. All trust had been broken. But I believe me. And from that moment on, I've told the truth, because that means staying in the light. And a radical thing happened in my life, and I love it. The radical change that changes us so that we can change people. Man, since that moment, honestly, since October 21st, 2015, which is the day I listened to that podcast, I have been helping men, walking with them at least, seek and search for the light and for freedom, and I've seen it happen. And it is a beautiful, beautiful thing, because it changes not just their life, but it changes the life of their family, of their spouse, of their children, of the church. It changes their because it changes their relationship with God. I have not looked at one pornographic image since October 21st, 2015. And I want to give you hope. Because it started with one person opening their mouth about their struggle with sin. So while this lesson is about pornography today, and I understand statistically not all of you it's never been a struggle for you. Not all of you. But for many it has at some point. And so what I wanted to say is what I'm saying is talk about your sins, your struggles. This doesn't have to be about pornography. This is applicable to all things hidden in the dark. Because it took someone shining light into my darkness for me to think and give me permission to talk about it too. And that's what I needed to hear the truth, which is also the light. Jesus Christ is the truth. He's the way. He is the life, and he is the light of this world. He came for us so that we would not remain in darkness, but we would have the light of life. He is the light. In him, there is no lie. There is no deceit. He is the truth. So the light is many things. One is open. It is me being exposed and vulnerable for who I am and what I've done. And if I truly want to seek help, then I have to seek the light. Since then, I've started some of the contact information that you've scanned in could get you to some resources. But I've been coaching men. I have seen men who have struggled with this literally for 6 decades, who struggled with horrific things that they partook in, find freedom. One man, 76 years old, just celebrated a year and 3 months since he's looked at a pornographic image. I was in a group with him, and he reached out for some one-on-one coaching. Not all the stories end that way. Because just as Jesus said, if you want to follow me, and this isn't about following me, I can promise you that. But if you want to follow Jesus, because he's the light, if you want the light, then you will follow him. Then you must be willing to take up your cross to follow him. You must be willing to give up father, mother, wife, children, brothers, sisters to follow me. That means everything that's of value to all of you. You've got to be willing to give it up if that's what it's going to take to find freedom, which is in the light. I've seen many men choose, I can't. And so today, I came to give you that story of hope. But to give you myself, I'm inviting you into a one-on-one relationship with me and with Cody. Because everybody's situation is a little bit different. Everybody's relationship, their marriage, where they come from, everything the way you grew up, the trauma that you've been through, it's all different. I'm inviting you into a one-on-one conversation where I can say, you know what? Here's a resource that might be helpful. Here's a person. Here's a group. You have to go to counseling. If you want to take this battle seriously, go to counseling. Into the men's group, we started to talk about that it's a battle. And when we go into battle, that we put on armor, that we have the right weapons, we have a strategy, we have what I have found is that most people, because they're paralyzed in fear of what will happen if it's exposed to the light, they have no weapons. They have no armor. They have no platoon of people watching their back. They have no strategy. They're literally just staying in the darkness. I urge you today, that's my message. Do not be okay staying in the dark. Don't. You're in a church with a pastor and other men who are saying, we'll talk about this. Come to us. Let's talk. In 100% confidentiality. We will talk. We will help. We will give you resources. The groups that we lead, they're 100% anonymous. It's a Zoom call. Once a week, you can get some support, hear other men, what they're going through, what they've gone through, what's worked for them, what's not. Everybody's a little bit different. I've got a handful of books that, if you read these things and process them, truly process them, pray over these books that I could give you, it will change everything. And so today, with the contact information I've given you, if you've at any point today thought I should reach out to him, let me urge you to do it within the next 24 hours. Shoot me an email, text me. I will reach out to you this week as I can. I promise you that. Because as soon as we walk out these doors, if you've not already been filled with lies of, well, his was just pornography. I've been unfaithful to my spouse. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. I'm not reaching out to him. It's a lie from the enemy. If you think that I wouldn't understand, he doesn't understand. It's a totally different situation. It's a lie from the enemy. Reach out. I'm not the solution. I don't necessarily have I don't have a perfect plan. But what I can do is empathize with you because I understand the struggle of sexual sin and how quickly it escalates in the dark, dark places that it can go. I've been working with men. I've heard some things that they're just heartbreaking. Marriages ended. Pastors will never pastor again. Church breakups because of sexual sin within their church, within their leadership. Reach out. I genuinely would love to have a conversation with every single one of you to know how I can help you, how I can help your spouse. Parents, this is a scary place. We're in a scary world. I've come here today to talk to parents, to tell you that you've got to fight for your children right now. There are apps. I've got some information on both of these tables for Covenant Eyes. It's one of the handful of apps that are out there. It does filtering, but it also offers accountability. There's a form on there. You can scan the QR code. There's one for husbands, for wives, for parents, for youth, for young people. There are many different resources out there, but parents, I'm filled with fear. And I don't want to parent from a place of fear. I want to parent from a place of faith. But do you know what that takes? It takes full surrender of our lives to our kids, but there are practical, tangible things we have to do to protect our children. And one of those things is simply to have a relationship where we can talk. And honestly, that's probably the hardest possible thing. To have a relationship where they're willing to come talk to us about the hardest things that they will ever deal with. They're not going to bring it up to you. You bring it up. I already talked to some people today about having that conversation with their kids. Covenant Eyes has some great resources. I've worked with many men on how do you get to the point where you can even talk to your wife about this? What will that look like? What do I need to do first? How do I need to prepare for this? If you want prayer, just call me. The Lord, on 140 days, I'll end with this. At 140 days after my wife found out, we talked for 4 straight days. 4 straight days. As soon as I'd get home from work, if she was willing to talk. Because I had no idea what to do. I had nobody else I was talking to about how do I help my wife in this moment. Because I'm a helper. If you take the Enneagram, I'm a helper. I didn't know how to help. I gave her space, but when she wanted to talk, I talked. And it felt like we talked for hours every single night, and it was from a place of across the room. But on the 4th night, she let me sit on the couch with her. And at some point, I had sat down on the floor, and she let me lay on her legs. And I was in this place of being able to talk about how lonely I had been. As a man of God, if I could even say that, I didn't know if I could say, I'm a man of God with as much sin as I had in my life. But I still showed up every time. I still led. I meant the things that I said. I just had this one part of my life. But I told her how lonely I was, how much I hated it, how disgusted I was, and how sad I was nobody ever talked to me about it. And I told her I was so sorry. And she said, I forgive you. And I was laying down and I looked up at her. I said, what did you just say? She said, I forgive you. My wife's not a forgiver. She still holds grudges against people in first and second grade. Like she doesn't talk for days. Like that was the type of relationship we'd had for 10 years. And in that moment, I knew that the only way she could forgive me in that moment was that she knew what Jesus had done for her, because he forgave her of her sins while she didn't deserve it. That he was present in the room that day, and she was able to live out Christ in her life. And she said, I forgive you amongst 12 years of living in lies and deceit with me. And I said, it changed everything in that moment. Wives, if there's anything, husbands, be compassionate. It's what the Lord calls us to. If he needs help, be compassionate. Love him through it. Help him find the help he needs. Help him get the accountability. Don't treat him like he's a little child. And husbands, when she does, let her. Don't get offended if she treats you like a child. She said, I forgive you. And it changed everything. And in that moment, the Lord said, this is it. I'm setting you free. And he said, I don't ever want you to shut your mouth about this. And I won't. Because statistically, there are many people in this room that struggle. And only 7% of churches have anything at all. There can't be enough people in this world talking about this particular sin issue. And there can't be enough people going into churches and saying, can we talk about the real problems we have? So I urge you, do not remain in the darkness. Do not let your kids get into that darkness. Take action. Seek the light. There's freedom in the light of Jesus Christ. Can I pray? Guys, at this time, I think if you want to come up for any reason, you stay in your seat. I don't know how you guys typically do this moment. But I know this is one of the most challenging, hardest, touchiest subjects that there is for someone who is in this particular sin or has been rocked. Your marriage has been rocked by this particular sin. So if there's anything that I can do, that Jason can do in this moment, I'm happy to pray with you. I will stay after. I'll talk to anybody. Reach out to me today so I can connect with you sometime this week. But there is so much transformation that needs to happen inside of individuals' hearts that will change their marriage, that will then change the culture of their household, that will change the culture of the church, and that can change this entire world with the light and the glory of Jesus Christ. And so I'm going to pray right now, as I've been praying all week. Lord, there are walls up in people's hearts that they have never thought about tearing down. And Father, I pray that through the power of the Holy Spirit, through your miraculous power, Father, the power that you have to make the blind see, the deaf to hear, the lame to walk, the oceans to part, the plagues that you send, Father, that through that miraculous power, that you start to tear those walls down. And I don't mean brick by brick. I mean tear the wall down so that your light can shine into the darkness that we have hidden for so long, where we don't even know what our identity is, our true relationship with you. We're so confused about it. I pray that you will tear those walls down. Father, that you give those that struggle with this addiction the boldness to fight and to battle it out and to realize, you know what, I don't have a weapon and I'm walking into the war zone with the greatest enemy that this world has ever seen. He's the Lord of this world. Father, I have no weapon. I have no armor. I have no people. I'm all alone. I need people around me, and I need your weapons. Father, may they fight in your name. Father, would you be with those who are broken by the sexual betrayal of their spouse today, that you begin to give them the boldness just to even try to heal, just to even try to recover, just to even try, like, give them the strength to be a helper, even though they're the one that was offended against. Father, it's such a scary and confusing place, but I know and I believe in you, and I've seen you work mighty miracles. Father, do it in the hearts of the individuals here today. Father, help us to protect our children and their eyes and their hearts in a world that is filled, it is crooked, it is perverse, it is a dark place. Father, may we seek after you truly, genuinely, and authentically, a deep relationship. Let us flee from sin and immorality, Father. May we seek Jesus as he is the light of this world. May we not remain in the darkness any longer. Give us boldness to take steps of faith, the practical, the tangible, but more importantly, in the spiritual warfare that rages for each one of our souls and the souls of our children and our spouses. Father, that we seek you in prayer on our knees to let you fight the battles that we've not been able to win, that we won't be able to win. Father, may you lead us in battle. May you give us the right weapons. May you give us the right resources, the right armor. Father, may we look to you, your power, and your word. Father, I pray these things for Centerpoint Church this morning. Father, that this may be a new radical step that they take, whether it's pornography or other sin issues. Just shine light into the dark places, that radical things begin to happen, that people 2 years from now they'll know something happened in February 2024 because that person's life changed and the way that they spoke and the way that they acted changed. Father, because they grew closer to you and their faith grew and their belief grew. And Father, they lived that out. Help us to not be distracted by this world. Father, I pray these things in our merciful Savior's name. Father, Jesus Christ died for the sins that we've had for decades. The struggles that we've had for decades. He wants us to live free here on this earth. You want us to be free from those things, not just in eternity because of the power of his blood, but here on this earth to live in freedom, not just in sobriety, not just to manage our habits, but Father, to live in freedom and in truth and in the light. Father, I pray that you shine light into the dark places of every single person here, every single person listening, Lord. And I pray these things in the name of light, that is Jesus Christ. Amen.